Hey guys, Plev here, and in this DCS MiG-29 tutorial, I'm going to walk you through setting up your controls to fly this awesome bird. We'll begin with assigning the controls on our stick. First up, we have Lock On /NWS button. This is a button you hold in order to lock or designate a target, but it's also a button you hold with the flaps up to engage high gain nose wheel steering. Next, we have Brake Lock button to press. That will unlock or undesignate the previously locked target. I also recommend you bind your leveling button depress on your stick. Next, bind your first and second detent of the gun trigger. Also bind your missile trigger fire button. Bind your flare dispense button. This will dispense both chaff and flares if you have the two mixed. Prior to takeoff, to activate your brakes, use the run-up brake lever. In all other usage cases of the brakes with this aircraft, use the brake lever depress. You should also have AFCS modes off button depress bound on your stick. This will deactivate autopilot functions. On my stick, I also have zoom in slow and zoom out slow bound. The trimmer reset button should also be bound. It's normally left Control T, and this will instantly trim your aircraft for its best maneuvering state. Bind your trim hat forward, left, right, and aft, with aft being to raise your nose up, forward to raise your nose down, left to bring your left wing down, right to bring your right wing down. Bind your TDC hat to press. This is different than your nose wheel steering and lock on button. This will often give you ranging cues or manually activate / deactivate the laser and other functions depending on context. Let's look at binding our throttle and other parts of the aircraft that we haven't yet gotten to. Bind your Speedbrake switch. This will deploy the Speedbrake if you're not carrying a centerline fuel tank and if your gear are not out. You must hold this button to keep the Speedbrake deployed. Bind your microphone button, right Alt/. Bind your external store switch outboard and inboard. Bind your three-way radar illumination switch. The three positions are off, dummy, which is essentially where the radar enters a standby unless being used in co-op mode, and then ILLUM for illuminate. Bind your WCS co-op switch. This also determines if the munition is retarded or non-retarded if being used in an air-to-ground context. Binding the WCS Lock Switch lets you determine whether or not positive IFF marked targets can be engaged at all, or even simply locked. The WCS Air/Ground mode switch will determine the symbology being displayed for air-to-air or air-to-ground with the gun. I strongly recommend you bind the radar TWF switch, the track while fly switch. This also determines whether or not you're using front hemisphere or rear hemisphere aspect. Forward 1. Above there, you have your radar elevation, delta H. I have that bound to my throttle with counterclockwise and clockwise. Next, bind your WCS mode selector knob. I have this bound to a knob, cycle counterclockwise and clockwise. I also recommend you bind your preparation switch. This lets you manually fire a missile outside of its launch authorized parameters. You'll want your radar mode select knob bound with close combat, close, head-on, and pursuit bound. And I strongly recommend binding your master arm switch. For autopilot modes, having the damper, auto recover, altitude hold, and attitude hold bound can be a pretty good idea. Binding your three flaps push buttons up, down for takeoff, and all the way down for landing. I also have my drag chute release and drag chute drop buttons bound. To jettison fuel tanks, I have my fuel tank emergency jettison guard open and I have my fuel tank emergency jettison button depress. You'll want your HMS monocle and the request AWACS Bogy dope keys bound. Finally, let's take a look at our AFCS inputs. For AFCS commands, I've got pitch, roll, rudder, I've got my span knob, I've got my TDC horizontal and vertical relative control, and my thrust left and right. Alright guys, that's going to be all for this short tutorial. I hope this helped you out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if it did. Clev, out.